are you?
The microphones. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so where do I have them? Announcements. Oh, here we go. After the announcements.
Oh, after the announcement.
You want to give everybody the heads up, Pat? We should start.
Okay, I was waiting for somebody to go.
Oh yeah, let's hit it. Let's hit it, sister.
Please be seated now. Our service is about to begin. Good morning, everyone here in the sanctuary and those watching virtually. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Jersey Shore. We ask that you please place your cell phones in worship mode. Thank you for joining us. We who bring a teaching of hope, who welcome all in our doors, the joyful, the heartbroken, atheists and Christians, Muslims and Jews, straight and gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer, transgender, all who are searching, seeking, looking for more meaning, more love, all of us gathered here together. My name is Pat Kennedy, and I am your worship associate this morning. I'm a member of this congregation and currently serve it as a member of the board, Margaret Circle, and Faith Action. Our worship service today is led by Cynthia Grzywinski. Cynthia, a UUCSJS member, has been affiliated with this community since 2005 and has and still serves on a number of committees. She is a retired FAA engineering research psychologist with a master's degree in aviation science, human factors. A lover of music, Cynthia is a member of the UUCSJS choir who, from time to time, you'll see at the piano or playing flute. As a lay speaker, she has contributed several sermons, a devotee and practitioner of Buddhism and the teaching of Thich Nhat Hanh. She also belongs to the UUCSJS Buddhist Sangha. Cynthia currently resides in Galloway Township with her rescue dog, Jazzy. Video of today's service will be available on YouTube channel later today. There are a few announcements for this week. The final Circle dinner for 2023 is scheduled for October 7th. Today is the final day to sign up. Soul Matters groups are small monthly groups connected to our worship themes with a unique practice component that helps us not just think about the themes, but live them. Each month, participants receive a theme-based packet that includes spiritual exercises, questions that encourage reflection on daily living, and recommended resources that help participants explore the themes in more depth. If you're looking for ways to grow your spirituality and get to know other people, Soul Matters groups may be for you. Sign-ups are open now. See Jess Dunn-Safanoff for more information. If you have donations for the food bank, animal shelters, or the Coalition Against Rape and Abuse, please bring them up to the front of the sanctuary after the service. Use the basket indicated. Mark your calendars for our annual auction, which will be held on Saturday, November 18th. Think about what you can donate. Not just things, but services and events. Services include babysitting, rides to and from Philadelphia Airport, tax preparation, piano or guitar lessons, and much more. Even better, donate dinners or other events, such as beer tasting, pizza making party, a Japanese dinner, etc. See Deb Dagavarian for ideas. We have an event from last year's auction that still has space available, the Day of the Dead Bonfire, hosted by Yvette and Steve McGahey. You will celebrate this Mexican holiday in which families welcome back the souls of their deceased loved ones. With traditional food and music, this event will be held at Yvette and Steve's lakeside property on Saturday, October 28th. The cost is $30 each. Go to the sign-up table by the window where there is more information. There will be a meeting today on the Greenlight Coffee House after the service. Join us next Sunday for Irvin Moreno Rodriguez with From Munkac to Millville, the story of Holocaust survivor Elizabeth Roth. He will speak on the new memoir published by the Sarah and Sam Schofer Holocaust Resource Center, From Munkac to Millville, the story of Holocaust survivor Elizabeth Roth. The book focuses on Holocaust survivor Elizabeth Roth's story of survival and resilience during and after World War II. And now, I call Maxine Blumenthal up to the podium to speak.
Okay, I think this is about right. We're good? Okay. Friday evening at my home, at my table, there were 4 Unitarians, 3 Catholics, and 1 undetermined, all celebrating the Friday Jewish Sabbath, the food, the ritual, and then the story of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Truly a very diverse group enjoying and learning, and they ate from 5:30 till almost 9 o'clock when I finally threw them out. So while we don't have that kind of time, I'm going to share with you today a little bit about the meaning of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Okay, for the last 9 of the 10 days, it has been Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and it is not at all like our New Year. It begins 10 days of introspection, looking at your own behavior for the previous year, making you aware. Have you committed a sin that you think is a sin, nobody else? You have to say, did I cheat someone? Did I say something that hurt someone in their life, their business, or their relationship with me? If you did during those 10 days, you must make it right. You cannot go to a priest and ask for absolution by doing Hail Marys. You can't give shekels to the poor and say, okay, that evens the score. You can't say to yourself, you know, that wasn't such a bad thing. I'll just be nice to him next time we see. No, if you don't make it right by sundown of Yom Kippur, and when the stars shine, you get 1 extra hour on Yom Kippur to make it right. You must do everything in your power to undo the wrong that you did. And to put it in really simple terms, let me start off. I'm going to try something if you'll be patient. The first day of Rosh Hashanah, since people in the past did not have TVs, watches, they had to know when Rosh Hashanah began. Therefore, the rabbis would go up in the highest building in the town, and they would sound the ram's horn. Here's the picture. It actually is a piece of a ram's horn. They would cut it off and blow into it 10 long staccato notes. So I've got it on my phone, and if my phone will cooperate, we'll see. It's also called the shofar. Come on. Come on. Be with me. Does this 10 times for the 10 days. Okay, you get it. At the end of Yom Kippur, the shofar is sounded for one long, plaintive note. And wealthy temples hire somebody just to do that. Alan, my husband, used to take out his saxophone, and using the lowest notes, he would emulate the shofar to start our dinner for Rosh Hashanah. Now, here's the deal. If you don't make it right, you will not be written in the book of life for the coming year. So it's very important that you do it right, because you want to be written in the book of life for a good and healthy year. I'll give you a simple example. Nathan goes to the marketplace with an old cow. He knows the cow is not giving a great amount of milk. She might do it for the next couple of months, but eventually there's not going to be milk. But he goes to the market and he sells it to a young farmer and assures him, oh, this is a good cow. And the man gives him some shekels for the cow. Now a couple months go by, it's been bothering him, and Yom Kippur is coming. And he says to himself, I can't do this, I can't live with this. He takes a good young cow, he travels to the village, he seeks out Joseph, and he apologizes. He can't just apologize, he must give him a good milk cow. And Joseph must accept the apology and the cow. And now they're even, and now he can go home knowing his conscience is clear. So I think that's a very big difference from some other religions where you are not required to make the wrong good specifically. And once your fate is sealed, that's it. And I have to go to ShopRite on my way home. I committed a sin. I had lots of carry bags and a lot of food for Rosh Hashanah. I didn't realize when I checked out there was a small package under one of my shopping bags. I got to my car, unloaded it. I said, oh no. There was a package with one little slice of fish. I could have said, ShopRite will never know. I have to go back to ShopRite. I've got the package with the barcode, and I have to go through the self-checkout and pay for my slice of fish because it bothers me. It's not right. So tonight, I will turn my phone on, or rather tomorrow night at sundown when the stars come out, with a clear conscience, I will listen to the shofar sounding the horn. And I hope you would be able to sound the horn if you were doing that. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to share with you today a very old folk tale from the Pacific Northwest, whose authorship is unknown. Few people have seen her, but those who have caught a glimpse by the full moon say she is wide as she is tall, with bare feet that curl like roots going into the ground, and hands more like talons than fingers. She has long, greasy gray matted hair tied up in vulture feathers and mossy breath. Her eyes are large and fixed in their sockets, and the noises that she makes are more bird than human. Caw, caw. And she is followed by birds who hope she will know them. They call her Nictia, which means of the night. And she lives in the hollowed-out stumps of redwood trees that have been hit by lightning. It is here she collects treasures of the forest, snail shells and mushroom caps, lichen, and bits of fox fur. But the most coveted treasures of all are owl parts, which are the bones, translucent, hollow, light as a grain of rice, which are the bones, but strong as the wind, the talons, the feathers. And when she has gathered all the bones of a particular owl and puts them in the order an owl's bones should be, she harvests earth from the seasonal creeks, and she very carefully and lovingly forms the shape of the creature, thinking as she does this of the nature of that particular bird. And when the clay dries, and when she needs to mold it, she uses the salt water truth of her tears to ply it, leaving sockets for wide eyes and putting the claws back in place. And while she is doing this, she sings softly, as a grandmother would to a child. And through the breath, her breath, going in and out, which creates the rhythm of her song, she warms the clay, which slowly gives way to flesh and feather and heartbeat. And when her song is finished, the owl opens its yellow-green eyes, spreads its wings, and flies, equipped now to cross the owl's bridge to the next realm, leaving a downy feather or two and the quivering memory of its beauty in the dank, wet air.
Thank you, Cynthia. Our chalice lighter today is Nick Bonar. Please join me in reading the chalice lighting words in your order of service. This chalice is for the living, the changing, the becoming. This chalice is for losing the script of your life, the chapters about who you are in other people's stories, startling, vivid, a new voice that already knows you, finally, a true story. Please rise now in clear spirit and sing our gathering hymn, number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, come. worshiper, lover of living. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. You are. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of living. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come yet again, come.
Today we're going to talk about grief and loss, and those are pretty heavy topics to talk about. Many of us have experienced the death of someone we love and felt sad or angry or confused. Sometimes after a few days, a week, or a little bit more, we're able to get back to normal. We continue our regular day-to-day tasks without much interruption, and we can experience those everyday joys again. But sometimes real grief hits us hard. Sometimes even years later, you find yourself staring out the window or at a blank wall, and you don't even know where you are or what you're doing. Your grief is all-consuming, and you feel absolutely destroyed. For those of you who have felt that way, I have a story for you today. But maybe you've never had that kind of morning. And if not, you've been lucky. But this story is also for you, because I want you to be prepared, because you will likely not be lucky forever. This story comes from a book called Tear Soup, A Recipe for Healing After Loss, and it's written by Pat Schweibert and Chuck Declan. We have it over there in the family resource area. You can check it out and take it home with you if you'd like. But the story goes like this. There's an older woman named Grandy, and someone Grandy loved very much has died. And there's only one thing she can muster to do. She makes a pot of tear soup. For many years, the custom of making tear soup has been forgotten. People found that it was easier to just take a can from the shelf and heat it up. But Grandy has no other choice than to start from scratch and figure out the recipe on her own. Grandy pulls out a big pot, big enough for all the memories, all the misgivings, all the feelings, and all the tears she needs to stew in the pot. You see, grief takes longer to cook than anyone thinks it will, so you need a big pot. Next, Grandy puts on her apron because she knows grief can get messy. And then Grandy starts to cry. She cries, she sobs, she weeps quietly, and sometimes when she's alone in her car and no one can hear her, she wails. She knows she needs to make the tear soup by herself because, well, people have a hard time seeing tears. When she tastes a sip of the broth, all she can taste is the salt from her teardrops. So she stirs in some memories, some bad and sad, some good and even silly. Over time, she stirs in all the different memories. But then she runs out of things to add. Has she run out of memories? This feeling is the worst of all. She feels cold and empty. What is really strange to her is that when she looks out the window, she's surprised to see that the rest of the world has gone on as usual, while her world has stopped. Grandy has friends who mean well, but in a way, they're afraid of her and don't know what to say. Sometimes she asks people to join her in a bowl of tear soup, but they don't want to go anywhere near it. At most, a few people can manage a cup of tear soup, and only her closest friends can join her in a whole bowl. Some people ask her if her soup is done yet, and others tell her it's time to get out of the kitchen. She knows they mean well, but they just don't get it. Grandy tries to get in some exercise, eat some comfort foods. Making tear soup is hard work, and Grandy knows there are times when she needs to take a break from her soup making. One day, her grandson sees she's not in the kitchen and asks if she's done making tear soup. Grandy replies, "Well, I don't think you actually ever finish. The hard work of making this batch of soup is almost done, though. I'll put the rest in the freezer, and I'll pull it out from time to time for a little taste." You see, grief, like a pot of soup, changes the longer it simmers and the more things you put into it. Some cooking requires that you measure the ingredients exactly, but making soup is an art, and you are the artist, improvising as you go. What's true about soup making is also true about grieving. Your only goal is that the blended creation will both satisfy your hunger and soothe what hurts you. If you find yourself needing to make tear soup, I have a recipe that you might find helpful. You'll need one heart willing to be broken open, a pot full of tears and a dash of bitters. Season it with memories, add a bunch of good friends, many handfuls of comfort food, and a lot of patience. Make sure to add plenty of exercise and enough self-care, and optionally a good therapist or support group. Choose the size pot that fits your loss. It's okay to increase the pot size if you miscalculate. Combine the ingredients, set the temperature for just a moderate heat, and remember that cooking time will vary depending on the ingredients needed, and that strong flavors will mellow over time. It's likely this pot will serve only one, but some people may join you for a cup or two. Embracing our grief means learning to appreciate and have gratitude for the entire soup. There's something deep within all of us ready to help us survive the things we think we can't. And tear soup can help us along.
The book is provided in the foyer, in which you're encouraged to write whatever joys and sorrows you have. There is nothing written in the book this week, so we'll just share in the joy of a new season coming in. Welcome, fall. Let us share a quiet time together to reflect on our week. During the musical interlude, you may come forward and place a pebble in the water to acknowledge a personal joy or sorrow. The offering is a sacrament of the Free Church. It is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who join us. More than 80% of our annual budget is supported by direct pledges and donations collected through our in-service offering. We hope that you will be as generous as you are able and support the ministry of this congregation. If this is your first time here, let the basket pass. Your presence is gift enough. You can also text a donation to 609-293-4495, or for those who are participating online, please visit uucsjs.org and click on the yellow donate button for ways to donate. The gifts of the congregation will be most gratefully received. The ushers will now collect the offering. Thank you.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
She can do it all.
Let me see, where's my juggling? Okay, let me see. Well, good morning again. It's good to see you all here. I have to say that after Jess's beautiful story about tear soup, there's not a whole lot more I can add. That really said it all. Thank you, Jess. That was beautiful. Wherever you are, there you are. Thank you. All right. Okay, so many, if not all of us, have suffered the loss of a loved one, the untimely death of a parent or grandparent, a sibling, a partner, or spouse, or perhaps, worst of all, the death of a child. Are we ever prepared to face the death of a beloved person in our lives? How do we navigate the path of grief to healing after such an unimaginable loss? In Joan Didion's book, The Year of Magical Thinking, she poignantly writes about her experience in life after the sudden and unexpected death of her husband. Quote, "Grief turns out to be a place none of us know until we reach it. We anticipate we know that someone close to us could die, but we do not look beyond the few days or weeks that immediately follow such an imagined death. We misconstrue the nature of even those few days or weeks. We might expect if the death is sudden to feel shock. We do not expect this shock to be obliterative, dislocating to both body and mind. We might expect that we will be prostrate, inconsolable, crazy with loss. We do not expect to be literally crazy, cool customers who believe their husband is about to return and need his shoes." End of quote. As individuals, we all experience the loss of one loved one differently. So I'd like to share some of mine with you right now. Until the death of my late husband, Richard, almost 5 years ago, the greatest loss I'd experienced was in 1969, the untimely death of my grandfather, my musical mentor, gentlest of souls. He died only a few short months after his multiple myeloma diagnosis. At 16, death was totally alien to me. Nothing had prepared me for it. I really felt okay until the day of his funeral. At that point, what I'd pushed away from my teenage psyche suddenly became all too clear to me. He was irrevocably torn from my life. I finally realized never again would I share walks with him to the beach, pancakes festooned with cocktail sauce and runny eggs, coffee ice cream, or listen together to the Grand Canyon suite, hearing the unmistakable clomp of the donkey's hooves. That day, I literally dissolved into a puddle of tears, of uncontrolled sobbing and gasping. I don't remember it all that well, but my mother described it as hysterical. Fast forward to October 30th, 2018, the day Richard died. Here I am, a responsible, level-headed adult, not that traumatized teenager anymore from 1969, actually thinking I was prepared for this. But only moments after Richard's final breath, when the nurse turned to me and said, "He's gone," that this curtain of pain and darkness enveloped me. Sometime later, some memorable lines from the movie Terms of Endearment came to mind. I don't know if you've seen that movie or not, but you don't have to have seen it. It's a scene in the hospital room where Aurora, the mother, is watching vigil over her dying daughter, Emily. Emily, at one point, wakes up, weakly gestures to her mother, and then dies. Aurora, the mother, exclaims to all and no one in particular, "I'm so stupid, so stupid. I thought when she was gone it would be a relief. It's so hard, so hard." I too thought it would bring relief. Richard's suffering finally ended, and as his round-the-clock caregiver witnesses to the ravages of his illness, the certainty of his death, my suffering too. How could I have been so stupid? I had to agree with Aurora. It's so hard. Throughout the past few years, I'm not sure how I navigated my own path through loss to healing. I know I couldn't have done it without the loving support of friends and family, the connection I felt with my UU and Buddhist communities, my brethren there, my Buddhist faith and practice, my love of nature and art and music, all of that. But maybe what mostly helped bring me back from the brink was my furry companion, my crazy rescue dog, Jazzy, whose unconditional love and my need to care for her helped me hang on to my tenuous connection to life. So let's see what the experts and others have to say about this journey through the wisdom and lens of notable writers, folk stories, Buddhist teachings, and a little psychology. Until recently, the prevailing scientific categorization of the grieving process relied heavily on the 5 stages of dying, epitomized by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her best-selling 1969 book On Death and Dying, a book she wrote after extensive interviews with hundreds of terminal patients. You may have heard of these stages. I'll quickly go through them. Denial, the first stage, is an attempt to mitigate the pain of the news, the unwanted truth about one's certain death. No, not me. They must have gotten the texts mixed up or something. It can't be true. Anger, the second stage, results from perceptions of being singled out, shaking your proverbial fist at the sky and shouting, "Why me?" Bargaining, the third stage, is an attempt to postpone death with good behavior or making a deal with the Almighty. If you let me live, let me see, you can take the sight from my left eye, or I won't sin again, I promise. Depression, the fourth stage, tends to appear when reacting to the reality of one's certain imminent demise, the certainty of death. Finally, acceptance, the fifth and final stage, a coming to terms with death and making peace with the inevitable. Some years after the publication of On Death and Dying, Kubler-Ross generalized and applied these stages to the grieving process. But does one size fit all? Even Kubler-Ross noted these stages of dying didn't necessarily conform to the grieving process. Actually, she described them more as a coping mechanism, a way to help one get through some difficult situations. So it wasn't really meant for this, but it was. Even today, though, they are still the therapeutic model many clinicians apply to grieving patients. That grief is a process to be worked through each stage, serially, one step after the other. That lingering in one stage for too long or skipping a stage could be psychologically damaging. But when does grieving become dysfunctional? In the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 4, DVM-4, used as a veritable Bible for mental disorders in the lexicon of psychiatric and psychological diagnosticians, if grieving, characterized by sadness, insomnia, or loss of appetite, go on for over 2 months, the grieving patient may be diagnosed with major depressive disorder, also known as clinical depression, a condition often treated with prolonged use of antidepressants and a contingent to some form of cognitive therapy. But wow, that's something of a heavy label to put on someone, to have someone identify with. Is feeling sad for more than 2 months not okay? Over the past several decades, rigorous empirical research in psychology has shown grief doesn't work this way, challenging the most widely held beliefs about loss and grief, such as the DVM-4's characterization of the 5 stages. A neuroscientist and grief specialist, Dr. Catherine Shear, who works with people still traumatized after months, sometimes years, over the loss of a loved one, explains the process of grief by quoting a passage from C.S. Lewis's book, A Grief Observed. Quote, "Bereavement is an integral and universal part of our experience of love. It is not the truncation of the process, but one of its phases. Not the interruption of the dance, but the next figure." End of quote. Shearer describes this as an attachment approach to grief, that attachment to another is what gives our lives security and meaning. When an attachment is severed by death, grief is a response to the lost attachment. Psychotherapist Dr. Kim Bateman, in her book, Crossing the Owl's Bridge, A Guide for Grieving People Who Still Love, uses a folk tale I read in the beginning, in the opening words, as one metaphor for transforming grief, in a way ritualistically maintaining this lost attachment. In the story, Nictia gathers the bones and other remains of an owl, molding them together with a physical manifestation of her grief, her tears, her singing, the in and out of her breathing, representing the beginnings and endings of all life experiences. She has ritually and lovingly resurrected the owl, allowing it to rise again in flight, leaving one or two downy feathers behind, a memento, a symbol of its love. As it makes its final journey, Dr. Bateman contends by symbolically recreating the lost beloved by remembrances, shared moments, relics of their lives, they become less abstract, making it easier to see yourself in relationship to them, not as some insubstantial image of their former selves, but a once living, breathing presence. The attachment has changed, but it's still there. We may then bid them farewell, knowing we too will soon cross the owl's bridge. Yes, the transformation of grief, that's something Buddhism has a lot to say about. One of my favorite sayings of the Buddha is, I teach suffering and the transformation of suffering. The key word here is transformation, not eradication or avoidance. Suffering is a universal, integral, and essential component of life. Without it, how could we experience joy? The Buddha taught we may transform our suffering by observing, accepting, and embracing it with mindful awareness. To ignore it, push it away, be overwhelmed, or identify with it only results in more suffering. The venerable Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, quote, "Suffering is not enough. Life is both dreadful and wonderful. How can I smile when I am filled with so much sorrow? It is natural. You need to smile to your sorrow because you are more than your sorrow." End of quote. Grief is suffering, yet even in the midst of grief, there is still space for joy, for feeling open and alive. I remember my first Christmas without Richard, dreading it, wishing I could hibernate over the holidays. But to my pleasant and great surprise, the things I loved about the season before his death, the dazzling, colorful lights, the singing of carols, gaudy decorations, the shiny wrapped gifts, the smell of pine, cookies, all of that, still had the power to delight me. Not that I was out of the woods, not that I didn't keenly feel his absence and longed to share this time with him. But I began to realize it was possible to feel alive once more. A fundamental Buddhist teaching, impermanence, also helped me a great deal in accepting Richard's loss. A Buddhist writer, teacher, and lecturer, Cohen Franz, wrote, "If someone asked me, what's Buddhism?" I'd reply, the 5 remembrances. It's why the Buddha became the Buddha. I found these remembrances to be a short but meaningful lesson on impermanence. And I'll go over them briefly. 1, I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. 2, I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. 3, I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. 4, all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. 5, my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. These may also be recited using the pronouns you and we. We are of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape ill health. You are of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. Rather than viewing these as negative or depressing, they serve to remind us that everything changes. All living things die, and to be grateful for the precious time we now have. We tend to live out our days acting as though we and those we love will go on forever. In this dreamlike state, we put things off, we believe we have all the time in the world. We're lost in meaningless distractions. Almost dismissive of the everyday miracles that surround us. In Mary Oliver's words in her poem, When Death Comes, I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. So old age, ill health, death, separation, and loss are inevitable. Attachments become severed, as written in the fourth remembrance. There is no way to escape being separated from those I love. Acceptance of this inevitability, instead of shattering us, though, can be viewed as a means to opening our hearts and minds, living fully in this precious present moment, to be mindful. Richard and I practice mindful awareness, more so after his cancer diagnosis and the grim, outlook of 2 to 4 year survival rate that really brought it home. But let's not wait until we or our beloved ones are diagnosed with a terminal illness. We all share one anyway. It's called life. Sometimes finding our way through the pain and path of grief can be a complicated process. I think Jessica alluded to that in her story. Oftentimes fraught not only with sadness, but anger. Why did you leave me? Regret. If only I'd fill in the blank. Existential fear. How could I possibly go on without him or her or them? And depression. At times we may linger an inordinately long time with these feelings, imprisoned by these dark emotional states, perhaps best exemplified by Queen Victoria, who mourned for over 40 years after the death of her husband, Prince Albert. At the other end of the spectrum, one may not seem to be mourning at all, stoically getting on with their lives, putting all this behind them. After all, it's the accepted norm in our Western machismo-oriented, death-averse culture. Unlike other cultures, we avoid the topic of death, and we are horrified at the image of a human corpse. Those grieving longer than psychologically or socially acceptable, say beyond the 2-month grieving period allotted by the DVM-4, may be considered weak-willed namby-pambies who should just get on with it already. Given this cultural attitude, and in an attempt to escape feeling these emotions, we may attempt to push them out of our conscious minds, ignore them, and they'll go away. But we do so at our peril. Although this reaction may provide short-lived temporary relief, there is no escape. These feelings, even if consciously unacknowledged, become buried deeply into our subconscious minds and may manifest themselves in ugly ways, like unprovoked anger, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and perhaps violent outbursts. Thich Nhat Hanh offers this advice to help transform the suffering of grief or any painful emotion. Quote, when a painful feeling comes up, we often try to suppress it. We don't feel comfortable when our suffering surfaces, and we want to push it down or cover it up. But as a mindfulness practitioner, we allow the suffering to surface so we can clearly identify it and embrace it. This will bring transformation and relief. End of quote. As I mentioned, their current psychological discoveries have given way to some amazing insights, which I found to be very much in line with Buddhist teachings, only these are more supported by scientific research. As clinical grief psychotherapist Miriam Greenspan explains in her paper, The Wisdom of Dark Emotions, few of us learn to fully experience those dark feelings of grief, fear, and despair. We are conditioned to avoid these emotions, keeping them at bay, thinking they are best shoved aside and not dwelled upon. They hurt too bad. Greenspan explains, quote, every dark emotion has a value and purpose. There are no negative emotions. There are only negative attitudes to emotions we don't like and can't tolerate, and the negative consequences of denying them. Grief tells us we are all interconnected in the web of life, and that what connects us also breaks our hearts. She goes on to say, if you're grieving, do so mindfully. Pay attention to your grief. Stop and listen to it. Befriend it and let it be. According to Greenspan, by attending to, befriending, and surrendering to grief, fear, and despair, we are surprised to discover a profound gratitude. We can look into the heart of darkness and emerge with a more resilient faith in life. In mourning the loss of a beloved person in our lives, I'd like to leave you today with these final thoughts. Even in the midst of sorrow, we may still maintain loving relationship to those we loved and lost by remembering them, by keeping and sharing the remembrances of their once living selves and how they touched our lives. Even in the midst of sorrow, we should not allay our emotions of grief, despair, and fear, but recognize and embrace them. In order to move through them, let them be. Even in the midst of sorrow, we may accept the inevitability of separation as part of the dance of life. Even in the midst of sorrow, there is no timetable for grief. With mindful awareness, we can embrace our sadness, our painful emotions, without labeling them as good or bad, and open ourselves to the experience of joy, even smiling at the wonders of life. Even in the midst of sorrow, as difficult as it may seem, as difficult as it is, we can find our way out of the darkness and into the light. Thank you very much.
We invite everyone to please stand in body and spirit. And if you don't stand, that's groovy too. We encourage movement. There is a love holding me. There is a love holding all that I love. There is a love holding all. I rest in this love. There is a love There is a love holding on. I rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love.
Let us read the words together for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame,
but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. We are going to